Welcome to the world of science fiction. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss new stories. Enjoy the listening. Max stepped off the interstellar transport, his eyes squinting against the harsh violet light from Chlorophilia's twin suns. The air was thick with the scent of alien flora, and the ground beneath him hummed with an energy he couldn't quite place. The spaceport was a frenzy of activity, with ships of all sizes coming and going, their sleek bodies reflecting the strange purple hue of the sky. But something felt off. It wasn't just a sudden change in atmosphere, but the way the local inhabitants, tall, slender beings with emerald skin and glowing gold eyes, were looking at him. They stared, their expressions a mix of surprise, confusion, and what seemed like mild disgust. Max adjusted the collar of his tailored suit, taking a deep breath. "Well, this isn't exactly the warm welcome I expected," he muttered to himself. His confidence remained unshaken, even as he passed by the sea of curious, green faces that followed his every step. The customs booth came into view, and Max strode forward, his boots clicking on the metallic floor. Behind the counter stood a green-skinned officer, her sharp features twisted into a permanent scowl. She was eyeing him as though he were some kind of nuisance, perhaps a stray animal that had wandered into the wrong territory. "Species?" she demanded in a low, clipped tone, her voice tinged with disdain as she looked him up and down. "Human," Max replied smoothly, flashing his most charming smile. "Max Harper, at your service. I'm here for a cultural exchange." The officer's eyes widened in disbelief, her face scrunching up in distaste. "Human? That's impossible. Your kind isn't allowed here." Max's smile faltered just a bit, but he quickly recovered, pulling out the data pad with his travel documents. "There must be some mistake," he said, scanning the screen and showing her the approval of his travel. "I've got all the clearances right here." The officer scoffed, waving him off dismissively. "Clearances?" she snorted. "No such thing exists for your kind." With a disgusted glance, she barked, "Security." Before Max could protest, two tall, broad-shouldered guards, their emerald skin shimmering in the light, approached him. They grabbed him by the arms with firm grips gentle enough not to bruise, but strong enough to show who was in control. Max found himself being escorted through a narrow corridor, the air growing colder, the walls gleaming white and sterile, almost too clean for comfort. His mind raced as the guards led him toward a holding area. Well, this wasn't in the brochure, he thought sarcastically. He was beginning to wonder if the information broker he'd trusted had misled him after all. Had he really been sold a dream, or was he now part of some elaborate joke? He sank down onto the cold, metal bench inside the holding cell. The door slammed shut behind him with a hiss, the faint echo ringing in the otherwise silent room. Max ran a hand through his salt and pepper hair, letting out a frustrated sigh. What was supposed to be the adventure of a lifetime, he thought, was quickly becoming the most bizarre travel experience of my life. Max sat in a sterile, white-walled holding room, his back pressed against the cold metal chair, arms crossed over his chest in a casual defiance. The room was unnervingly quiet, the faint hum of distant machinery the only sound breaking the stillness. The walls gleamed with an almost clinical precision, everything in place, yet nothing about it felt welcoming. He had been waiting for what seemed like an eternity, his mind racing through a dozen different scenarios, none of them pleasant. The chill of the room gnawed at him, yet it was nothing compared to the chill of uncertainty he felt in the pit of his stomach. What the hell is going on? He thought. They've got me locked up like a lab rat and no one's telling me anything. The thought of the miscommunication, the broken promises, and the cold reception stung a little, but Max wasn't one to give in to frustration. The door to the holding room hissed open suddenly, breaking the silence with a sharp mechanical sound that sent a chill down his spine. For a brief moment, Max thought it might be a mistake. Maybe he was going to be released. But when the tall, imposing figure stepped inside, any hope he might have had quickly evaporated. She was something unlike any woman he had ever seen. Her height alone was enough to make her presence dominate the room, her green skin glowing softly in the dim light, shimmering with an almost ethereal quality, like she was made of something otherworldly. She wore a sleek military uniform that seemed designed to enhance her commanding presence, the fabric hugging her frame with precise elegance. Her golden eyes, sharp and calculating, fixed on him immediately, not with the curiosity of someone meeting a stranger, but with the scrutiny of a predator. Max's breath caught for a moment, a strange tension filling the air as she slowly approached. It wasn't just her physical presence that unnerved him, it was the way she carried herself, as though she didn't simply walk through life, but rather owned it. She moved with a quiet grace, each step precise and deliberate, as though every action was measured, controlled. She was the kind of person who commanded attention without even needing to raise her voice. She stopped in front of him, standing tall and proud, her eyes never leaving his face. There was no greeting, no softening of her demeanor, just cold authority, the kind of power that seemed to come from a place of unquestionable confidence. "I am Lilith, Chief of Security," her voice rang out, steady and low, each word deliberate, as if she was not simply speaking, but demanding attention. "Explain your presence, human." Max straightened up in his chair, feeling the weight of her gaze bearing down on him, but he refused to let it shake his composure. He was here for a reason, and he wasn't going to back down just because some alien with golden eyes was trying to intimidate him. "There seems to be some mistake," he said, his voice calm, though there was an edge of frustration creeping into his words. "I came here to learn about your culture. I was told your people were open to cultural exchange." Lilith's expression didn't change, but Max noticed the subtle shift in her stance, an almost imperceptible tightening of her jaw. She looked at him like he was an annoyance, something that needed to be dealt with rather than understood. Her gaze swept over him, her eyes narrowing slightly as she took in every detail of his appearance, as if sizing him up. "Human," she repeated, her voice low with a tinge of disbelief. "We view your kind as little more than animals. You are not worthy of being here." Max's eyes flashed with surprise, but he quickly masked his reaction with a wry smile. The audacity of her statement stunned him, but he refused to let it show. This was nothing he hadn't dealt with before. Every negotiation, every challenge, it was all just another obstacle to overcome. He couldn't let her get under his skin. "Now, hold on just a minute," Max said, his voice steady but firm. "I'm a businessman. I've traveled halfway across the galaxy to get here. I've got valuable information and insights that could benefit both our species. I wasn't expecting this." He gestured around the cold room, the thinly veiled mockery in his voice unmistakable. I was under the impression that you were interested in working with humans, not throwing them in cells. Lilith stepped forward then, her eyes never leaving his, and Max found himself instinctively sitting up straighter. There was something about her, something unsettling, but also undeniably captivating. Her presence was overwhelming, almost magnetic. Yet it didn't feel like an invitation to get closer, it felt like a warning. She was closing the distance between them, and Max could feel the tension thickening in the air with every step she took. "Businessman," she repeated the word again, her lips curling into a thin, humorless smile. "You're nothing more than a pest, an inconvenience." Her tone was biting, as though the very idea of him was something beneath her. "You don't belong here, human." Max's smile faltered for a moment, but his confidence didn't waver. He leaned forward slightly, meeting her gaze head-on. He wasn't going to let this woman, this creature, bully him into submission. "I'm here because I want to understand," he said, his tone softening just enough to hint at sincerity. "I came because I believed in the possibility of something greater, something that goes beyond what we know, beyond our differences." He paused for a beat, his eyes locking onto hers with a mixture of challenge and curiosity. "So yes, Lilith, you can call me a pest. But if you want to truly understand what humans are capable of, you'll listen to me." Lilith's expression remained unchanged, but there was something in her eyes now, a flicker, brief but unmistakable. It wasn't admiration, but it wasn't pure contempt either. It was something else, something more complex. For the first time since their encounter began, Max saw a hint of uncertainty flash across her face, but it was gone in an instant, quickly masked by the same icy indifference that had dominated her demeanor. She turned away abruptly, signaling for the guards to step forward. "You will come with me," she ordered, her voice a sharp command that couldn't be ignored. "You have no place here. But we will see what your leaders have to say." Max rose slowly, not wanting to show any sign of defeat. As the guards moved in, flanking him on either side, he couldn't help but wonder if this was the beginning of something more than just a misunderstanding. There was something about Lilith, the way she carried herself, the way she looked at him, that made him think she was hiding more than just disdain. As they led him down the narrow hallway, Max allowed himself a small, knowing smile. This was far from over. In fact, he had a feeling it was just getting started. Max was led through a series of gleaming white corridors, the air thick with a sterile scent of antiseptic and something else he couldn't quite place. The metallic floor beneath him seemed to hum with an energy of its own, the walls pulsing with an almost eerie quietness. There was something unnerving about the entire environment. It felt like he had stepped into a realm where every movement, every breath, was being monitored. The guards flanked him tightly as they guided him toward what seemed to be a lab, a place far too clinical and impersonal for Max's liking. As they arrived at the door, it opened with a soft hiss, revealing a room filled with strange devices he couldn't begin to understand. Bright lights bathed everything in an almost clinical glow, casting long, sharp shadows across the metallic surfaces. Tables with complex equipment lined the room, each device more foreign than the last. The air buzzed with a faint hum of machines at work, and Max couldn't help but feel like an insect pinned under a microscope. The sterile nature of the place felt suffocating, but he refused to let the anxiety show on his face. Inside, 2 Chlorophilia scientists were waiting for him. One was tall and stern-looking, with sharp features and golden eyes that held an unrelenting focus on the task ahead. Dr. Sophia, Max assumed, based on the way the other scientist kept glancing at her for approval. She was meticulously setting up a series of devices, her movements quick and precise. The other, a younger woman with softer features and a hint of curiosity in her golden eyes, looked at Max with a mixture of intrigue and shyness. Lee, the assistant, was the one who caught his attention the most. Lee looked like someone who had stepped straight out of an alien dream. Her green skin shimmered under the lab lights, and her long, flowing hair had a natural iridescence that gave her an almost ethereal quality. But it was her eyes, wide and full of wonder, that held Max's attention. She looked at him like he was something both fascinating and mysterious, like she wanted to understand him in a way the others didn't. Max Harper, the human specimen, Dr. Sophia's voice broke the silence as she adjusted her instruments. Her tone was flat and professional, as if she was speaking about a particularly unremarkable subject. We will begin the first series of tests now. Please cooperate. We need to understand your biology better. Max raised an eyebrow but remained calm. Specimen? Is that what I am to you? He couldn't help the humor in his voice, though it was a bit forced. He hated the feeling of being reduced to a subject for experimentation. Dr. Sophia didn't respond, her focus entirely on the equipment in front of her. But Lee, standing off to the side, glanced at Max, her cheeks flushing a shade darker of green. Her eyes lingered on him for a moment, filled with a curiosity that seemed almost too human for someone from another species. Lee cleared her throat softly, avoiding his gaze. Is it true that humans keep pets? She asked, her voice almost shy. The question caught Max off guard, and he found himself chuckling, the lightheartedness of the moment bringing a sense of normalcy in the midst of the bizarre situation. Max grinned, leaning back slightly, as if he were in the comfort of his own home rather than being observed by a pair of alien scientists. Oh, absolutely, he said with a playful tone. I had a pig named Hamlet. He was a bit of a troublemaker. We also have dogs, cats, birds. You name it. My neighbor even had a pet hamster with a tiny wheel, very cute, very loud at night. Lee blinked, clearly intrigued, and took a step closer. A pig? She repeated, her voice filled with genuine curiosity. That seems unhygienic. Doesn't it cause problems? Max burst into laughter, the sound echoing slightly in a sterile space. Unhygienic, he said between chuckles. Nah, not really. It's a bit messy, sure, but the companionship is worth it. Who can resist a pig's adorable little face, right? Lee's expression softened, the faintest smile curving her lips. There was something endearing about the way she looked at him, as though his words painted a picture of a world she could only dream of understanding. Max found himself enjoying the way she reacted, curious, unafraid, and almost human. And what else? Do humans form bonds with these animals? Lee asked again, her tone laced with genuine interest. Max, sensing her genuine curiosity, allowed himself to relax. He leaned forward slightly, his smile widening. Oh, absolutely. They are family. He paused, his eyes catching hers for a moment. It's not just about keeping them around for company. They bring something special into your life, something you can't quite explain. But once you experience it, you understand. Lee's gaze softened, and Max swore he saw a flicker of longing in her eyes, though she quickly masked it. Dr. Sophia, however, seemed uninterested in their small talk. She was busy calibrating the machines, her sharp, professional focus never wavering from the task at hand. She wasn't one for idle conversation. As Lee moved to fetch a device from the table, Max's eyes followed her. There was something about her, an openness, a desire to connect that drew him in. While Dr. Sophia seemed to treat him like an object to be studied, Lee seemed fascinated by him, eager to learn. But she also seemed to hold herself back, as though torn between her duty and her curiosity. Max couldn't resist a small smile, pushing the situation aside for a moment to lighten the mood. "So, Lee," he said casually, "if I were to take a guess, you've never had a pet, have you?" Lee froze for a split second, her eyes briefly flickering to Dr. Sophia before returning to Max. She hesitated, then shrugged, her expression a little sheepish. We have animals here?" She gave a small, almost embarrassed laugh. "But they're very different from your pets." Max chuckled softly, his charm never faltering. "Ah, but that's the best part. The differences make it all the more interesting. Who knows, maybe one day I can convince you to try having a hamster for yourself. They're not so bad once you get used to the squeaking." Lee's laugh was light, almost like a musical sound, and for a moment, it felt like they weren't in a lab, but just two people talking, sharing stories. But before the moment could stretch any longer, Dr. Sophia's voice snapped him back to reality. "Enough chit-chat. We've completed the preliminary tests. Next, we'll begin the analysis of your blood and cells," Dr. Sophia announced flatly, her eyes still locked on the monitor in front of her. Max didn't let the sudden coldness of her tone get to him. He flashed Lee one last grin, the kind that made her cheeks flush a deeper green, before being led to the next round of tests. Despite the cold, clinical nature of the situation, Max felt a small sense of camaraderie with Lee. Her curiosity and warmth were a stark contrast to Dr. Sophia's mechanical professionalism, and for a moment, Max couldn't help but wonder what it would be like to truly connect with someone from this strange world. But that would have to wait. For now, he was the human specimen and they had only just begun their research. Max and Lee spent more time together as the days passed. There was a growing ease between them, a natural chemistry that was hard to ignore. Every conversation felt like peeling back layers of mystery, as if they were two travelers from different worlds, trying to understand each other. Max couldn't help but notice the way Lee's eyes lit up every time he shared something about Earth. The curiosity in her gaze was almost magnetic. She was fascinated by every little thing, the oddities of human culture, the way their emotions could be expressed through laughter, how humor seemed to be a universal language, despite the vast differences between their species. It wasn't just the facts he shared, but the passion in his voice, the way he used humor to make everything seem lighter, even when the situation was tense. One evening, they found themselves walking through one of the many bioluminescent gardens that dotted the city of Chlorophilia. The soft glow of the plants illuminated their faces in an otherworldly way, casting long, shifting shadows that made the surroundings feel like something out of a dream. Max caught sight of Lee beside him, her green skin glowing gently in the light, her hair shimmering like liquid emerald. As they walked, the silence between them felt more comfortable, more natural than it had before. The night air was warm, tinged with a soft scent of alien flowers Max couldn't identify. Max turned toward Lee, a playful grin tugging at the corners of his mouth. "So, what do you think about us trying some Earth food?" He raised an eyebrow, as if daring her to consider it. "I promise, a hamburger will blow your mind. It's like comfort in a bun." Lee's cheeks flushed a deeper shade of green, and she lowered her gaze for a moment, unsure. There was a faint smile on her lips, the kind that only appeared when she was really trying to hide her excitement. "I think I'd like to try." How does it taste?" Her voice was soft, almost shy. Max chuckled at her response. "Trust me, it's the kind of food you won't forget. It's warm, hearty, kind of like a hug in food form. It's simple, but it's a little piece of home." Leah looked up at him, her golden eyes shining with a mix of fascination and something else, something deeper, something Max couldn't quite place. He couldn't help but feel a connection, something more than just curiosity. There was an ease to the way they were together now, a rhythm that was forming between them. As they continued walking, their conversation shifted from food to culture, to the different worlds they came from, and the oddities of their respective societies. Lee was eager to learn about Max's Earth, and Max found himself enjoying the conversations more than he expected. He told her about Earth's holidays, how humans celebrated different seasons, the way they found meaning in music, art, and even in the simplest things like a shared meal. Lee, on the other hand, was fascinated by everything. "Do all humans experience emotions the same way?" she asked, her voice almost hesitant. "Like joy, fear. Do you feel them in the same way?" Max paused, considering the question carefully. It was an honest inquiry, one that didn't just seek knowledge, but understanding. "Well, I think it's complicated," Max said thoughtfully. "We all feel the same emotions, but how we express them, how we handle them can be different. Some people laugh when they are nervous, some cry when they are happy. I guess the real trick is learning to accept your feelings, no matter how weird they seem." Lee nodded slowly, absorbing his words. "That sounds comforting. To know that it's okay to feel different things at once." Max looked at her, a gentle smile tugging at his lips. He hadn't expected to feel this way, but there was something so pure, so refreshingly earnest about Lee's curiosity. "Yeah, it's okay. The trick is just not to let it overwhelm you. Sometimes you just need someone to laugh with you, or to listen when things get tough." She turned toward him, her smile wide now, as if she were sharing a secret. "You humans are so different. But I think I understand you a little better now." Max smiled back, warmth filling him. They had come from completely different worlds, but right then, standing together in that strange, glowing garden, it didn't seem to matter. There was something about their shared curiosity, the way they had started learning from each other, that felt real. And, strangely, it felt comfortable. "Well, I'm glad I'm not as confusing as I look," Max teased, giving her a wink. Leah laughed, a soft, melodic sound that was like music to his ears. "You're not confusing. Just different. Max raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Just different. Just different, she repeated with a shy smile, glancing down at the soft bioluminescent flowers that lined the pathway. Max chuckled, but he couldn't help but feel that there was something more to her words, something deeper that she hadn't said. But he wasn't going to push. Not yet. Their laughter faded into a comfortable silence, and as they walked side by side, the glow of the alien plants reflecting off their faces, Max couldn't help but feel that this strange, unexpected bond was only the beginning of something much bigger. All the while, Lilith watched from a distance, her golden eyes narrowing as she observed the growing connection between the two. A flicker of something unreadable passed over her face. There was no doubt in her mind that Max was making his way deeper into the heart of Chlorophilia, perhaps deeper than she would have liked. But for now, she kept her distance, her eyes lingering a little longer than she should have. Let them have their moments, she muttered under her breath. The council will decide his fate soon enough. Did you enjoy this story? Do you think their journey has only just begun, or is there so much more waiting for them out there? Leave your comment below. Galactic Conundrums always wants to hear your thoughts. Let's keep the story going. Max had noticed the subtle shift in the atmosphere. Everywhere he went, the eyes of the Chlorophilia inhabitants followed him, their expressions now a mixture of curiosity and fascination rather than the open disdain he had encountered at first. Even the air around him seemed to hum with the tension of change, a shift that had begun to alter the way he was seen, not just as an outsider, but as someone with the potential to make a real difference. Still, Lilith was a constant presence in his life. She continued to serve as the strict enforcer of the rules, maintaining a cold professionalism whenever they crossed paths. But Max wasn't one to be deterred. His humor, his charm, and his seemingly endless supply of strange Earth stories never stopped coming. It was his way of carving out a space for himself in a world that still considered him a curiosity, a living anomaly. One evening, they found themselves alone in a quiet, secluded part of the Chlorophilia citadel. The air was heavy with the scent of blooming alien flowers, their petals glowing faintly in the twilight. Max had been walking through the gardens when Lilith appeared, as if out of nowhere, her golden eyes fixed on him as always, intense, unwavering, unreadable. Max leaned casually against a stone column, his gaze playful. "So, you don't like the disruption I bring, do you, Lilith?" he asked with a mischievous grin, his eyes gleaming with that ever-present spark of humor. Lilith froze for a moment, her posture stiffening. The way he spoke, so carefree and full of light, irritated her. She had always prided herself on control, on maintaining a level of distance from the chaos of emotions and distractions that humans seem to live by. Max's approach to life, the laughter, the constant joking, was a constant reminder of that difference. "Don't joke with me, human," Lilith replied sharply, her voice betraying a flicker of irritation. She turned slightly, her gaze shifting away from his, though her body remained rigid. But this time, there was something more in her expression. Max noticed it right away, just a hint, a subtle change. It was like a momentary lapse in the fortress she had built around herself, and for the first time, he saw a flicker of something that wasn't annoyance. There was something else there, something hidden. "It's just a joke, Lilith," Max said, his tone light but sincere. He took a step closer, his smile softening as he tried to understand what she was feeling. You're too serious all the time. Life's too short for that, don't you think? Lilith's golden eyes narrowed, but it wasn't with anger this time. There was a quiet struggle behind them, something she clearly didn't want to acknowledge. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other, looking away from Max as if the very act of meeting his gaze was too much for her to bear. I have responsibilities, she said, her voice softer now, tinged with something almost vulnerable. I can't afford to indulge in jokes or distractions. Max, sensing the opening, took another step closer, his tone playful yet gentle. Responsibilities, huh? I get that. But maybe you could take a break, just for a minute. You've been running this show for so long. Maybe it's time you let someone else take the lead for once. There was a brief silence, and Max couldn't help but watch the way Lilith's jaw tightened. But there was something else in her eyes now. It wasn't disdain, or even irritation. It was something closer to curiosity. For the first time since their meeting, Max didn't see a cold, distant figure standing before him. He saw someone who was conflicted, who perhaps wasn't as sure of herself as she wanted to let on. The hard exterior she presented to the world, was it just a shield, or had it become her prison? Lilith let out a sharp breath, but her eyes flickered back to Max, an unreadable look passing over her face. You're annoying, you know that, she said quietly, her words half a reprimand, half an acknowledgement. But maybe you're right. Max raised an eyebrow, a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. Maybe I am. But don't worry, I'll take full credit for your first laugh in years. Lilith's lips twitched just a little. It was almost imperceptible, but it was there. A smile, fleeting and restrained, but it was a smile nonetheless. She quickly wiped it away, but Max had seen it. The moment lingered for a while. The garden around them seemed to grow quieter, as if it, too, was holding its breath. Max was almost certain that he had cracked a small part of her armor, just a sliver, but in that moment, that sliver felt like a victory. As the tension between them dissipated, Max stepped back, a playful grin spreading across his face. Well, I'm glad we got that out of the way. Don't worry, I won't keep joking around, at least, not until you let me take you to that burger joint I told you about. Lilith looked at him, her posture still rigid but with a faint glimmer of something else in her gaze. Something softer. For the first time since their first meeting, she didn't look at him like an annoyance. She didn't look at him with the same icy authority. Instead, there was a slight warmth, a shift in the way she regarded him. But she still wasn't ready to let down all her defenses. I'm not sure if I'll ever trust you, human, she said, the words more thoughtful than biting. Max shrugged with a nonchalant grin. That's fair. Trust is a work in progress. And as they stood there, in the quiet, glowing garden, Max couldn't help but wonder if he was beginning to make more of an impact than he had first realized. Maybe, just maybe, Lilith was starting to see him as something more than a pest. And if that was the case, who knew what would happen next? Max had noticed the subtle shift in the atmosphere. Everywhere he went, the eyes of the Chlorophilia inhabitants followed him, their expressions now a mixture of curiosity and fascination rather than the open disdain he had encountered at first. Even the air around him seemed to hum with the tension of change, a shift that had begun to alter the way he was seen, not just as an outsider, but as someone with the potential to make a real difference. Still, Lilith was a constant presence in his life. She continued to serve as the strict enforcer of the rules, maintaining a cold professionalism whenever they crossed paths. But Max wasn't one to be deterred. His humor, his charm, and his seemingly endless supply of strange Earth stories never stopped coming. It was his way of carving out a space for himself in a world that still considered him a curiosity, a living anomaly. One evening, they found themselves alone in a quiet, secluded part of the Chlorophilia citadel. The air was heavy with the scent of blooming alien flowers, their petals glowing faintly in the twilight. Max had been walking through the gardens when Lilith appeared, as if out of nowhere, her golden eyes fixed on him as always, intense, unwavering, unreadable. Max leaned casually against a stone column, his gaze playful. "So, you don't like the disruption I bring, do you, Lilith?" he asked with a mischievous grin, his eyes gleaming with that ever-present spark of humor. Lilith froze for a moment, her posture stiffening. The way he spoke, so carefree and full of light, irritated her. She had always prided herself on control, on maintaining a level of distance from the chaos of emotions and distractions that humans seem to live by. Max's approach to life, the laughter, the constant joking, was a constant reminder of that difference. "Don't joke with me, human," Lilith replied sharply, her voice betraying a flicker of irritation. She turned slightly, her gaze shifting away from his, though her body remained rigid. But this time, there was something more in her expression. Max noticed it right away, just a hint, a subtle change. It was like a momentary lapse in the fortress she had built around herself, and for the first time, he saw a flicker of something that wasn't annoyance. There was something else there, something hidden. "It's just a joke, Lilith," Max said, his tone light but sincere. He took a step closer, his smile softening as he tried to understand what she was feeling. "You're too serious all the time. Life's too short for that, don't you think?" Lilith's golden eyes narrowed, but it wasn't with anger this time. There was a quiet struggle behind them, something she clearly didn't want to acknowledge. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other, looking away from Max as if the very act of meeting his gaze was too much for her to bear. "I have responsibilities," she said, her voice softer now, tinged with something almost vulnerable. "I can't afford to indulge in jokes or distractions." Max, sensing the opening, took another step closer, his tone playful yet gentle. "Responsibilities, huh? I get that. But maybe you could take a break, just for a minute. You've been running this show for so long. Maybe it's time you let someone else take the lead for once." There was a brief silence, and Max couldn't help but watch the way Lilith's jaw tightened. But there was something else in her eyes now. It wasn't disdain, or even irritation. It was something closer to curiosity. For the first time since their meeting, Max didn't see a cold, distant figure standing before him. He saw someone who was conflicted, who perhaps wasn't as sure of herself as she wanted to let on. The hard exterior she presented to the world, was it just a shield, or had it become her prison? Lilith let out a sharp breath, but her eyes flickered back to Max, an unreadable look passing over her face. "You're annoying, you know that," she said quietly, her words half a reprimand, half an acknowledgement. But maybe you're right. Max raised an eyebrow, a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. Maybe I am. But don't worry, I'll take full credit for your first laugh in years. Lilith's lips twitched just a little. It was almost imperceptible, but it was there. A smile, fleeting and restrained, but it was a smile nonetheless. She quickly wiped it away, but Max had seen it. The moment lingered for a while. The garden around them seemed to grow quieter, as if it, too, was holding its breath. Max was almost certain that he had cracked a small part of her armor, just a sliver, but in that moment, that sliver felt like a victory. As the tension between them dissipated, Max stepped back, a playful grin spreading across his face. Well, I'm glad we got that out of the way. Don't worry, I won't keep joking around, at least, not until you let me take you to that burger joint I told you about. Lilith looked at him, her posture still rigid but with a faint glimmer of something else in her gaze. Something softer. For the first time since their first meeting, she didn't look at him like an annoyance. She didn't look at him with the same icy authority. Instead, there was a slight warmth, a shift in the way she regarded him. But she still wasn't ready to let down all her defenses. I'm not sure if I'll ever trust you, human, she said, the words more thoughtful than biting. Max shrugged with a nonchalant grin. That's fair. Trust is a work in progress. And as they stood there, in the quiet, glowing garden, Max couldn't help but wonder if he was beginning to make more of an impact than he had first realized. Maybe, just maybe, Lilith was starting to see him as something more than a pest. And if that was the case, who knew what would happen next? The calm of Chlorophilia's night was shattered with a deafening roar that reverberated through the air, shaking the very ground beneath Max's feet. He stepped outside onto the observation deck, squinting against the glaring lights that flickered on in the distance. The sky, once filled with the soft glow of twin suns sinking below the horizon, was now consumed by darkness broken only by the ominous silhouette of ships on the approach. Zarian ships. Max's heart skipped a beat. The Zarians were a race of warlike conquerors, their aggression and thirst for domination legendary. The fleet stretched out across the sky, its sheer numbers overwhelming. The ship's dark, jagged forms were like shadows against the deepening night, their engines humming with power. Max's breath quickened, his pulse racing as the reality of the situation sank in. The warning alarms began to blare throughout the city, sharp, high-pitched sounds that sliced through the peaceful hum of Chlorophilia's daily life. He could hear the rush of footsteps in the halls behind him, the hurried calls of soldiers and officials scrambling to prepare for the impending assault. The entire city was on high alert, but Max knew there wasn't much time. Max, his voice steady, but urgent. We need to act fast. If we don't stop them now, it's over. Lilith, who had been nearby, was already on her communicator, her sharp voice cutting through the noise of the chaos. Her presence was commanding, but even she couldn't hide the edge of tension that crept into her words. Lilith, shouting into the communicator. Activate the emergency defense systems. Get every available fighter into the air. We need to prepare for full-scale combat. Max watched as she turned, her eyes locking onto his with a sense of desperation. For a brief second, he saw something in her gaze, a flicker of uncertainty, something almost human, before she masked it behind her usual cold composure. Lilith, pausing for a moment, her voice softer than usual. Can you help us, Max? We're going to need every hand we can get. Max didn't hesitate. He knew what needed to be done. The weapons systems in the city weren't going to hold up against a fleet this large. He had seen the blueprints for an experimental weapon during his brief time here, a weapon powered by the unique bioluminescent flora that was native to Chlorophilia. It had never been fully tested, but it had the potential to unleash a devastating burst of energy that could level entire fleets. Max, his voice resolute, full of determination. I know how to activate it. I've seen the designs. This is our only shot. We have to act now. Without waiting for another word, Max moved, his stride purposeful and focused. He knew exactly where he needed to go, the central command bunker where the final stages of the weapon's activation were housed. He could hear the chaos growing louder around him, the pounding of footsteps, the frantic chatter of soldiers, but he tuned it all out. His mind was clear. He had a job to do. He arrived at the control room, and inside, Dr. Sophia and Lee were already at their stations, quickly preparing the necessary systems. Despite their calm demeanor, Max could see the anxiety in their eyes. Dr. Sophia, normally unflappable, had a slight furrow between her brows as she manipulated the control panel. Lee, her face pale and drawn, was scanning the data on a nearby monitor, her eyes darting back and forth with increasing speed. Max, grinning, trying to lighten the mood. All right, folks. It's showtime. Let's make some history. Dr. Sophia shot him a quick glance but didn't respond. Lee, on the other hand, seemed to brighten slightly, her expression momentarily softening. Max noticed her reaction but didn't linger on it. Now wasn't the time for distractions. He moved to the central console, where the weapon system controls were housed. It was a tangle of wires, blinking lights, and alien technology that Max had barely begun to understand. But the diagrams had been burned into his mind. The weapon needed to be powered up, synchronized with the planet's bioluminescent grid, and then fired at maximum capacity. Simple enough, right? Lee, pointing at the control panel, her voice trembling slightly. We've never tested it at full power. We don't even know if it will work, but we have no other choice. Max gave her a reassuring smile. Trust me. It'll work. It has to. Max quickly worked alongside Dr. Sophia and Lee to initiate the sequence. As the control panel lit up, he felt the rush of power surge through the facility. It was like a hum of raw, untapped energy, the kind that came right before a storm. He felt the excitement build inside him. This wasn't just about surviving. This was about victory. Meanwhile, Lilith, coordinating the planet's defense efforts, was overseeing the fighter jets taking off into the night sky, their engines roaring as they climbed into the darkness, launching toward the incoming fleet. Her gaze flicked toward the control room for just a second, and Max caught it. The look in her eyes was sharp, but now there was a flicker of respect behind them, something he hadn't seen before. As the final pieces of the weapon activated, the ground beneath them trembled, and Max could hear the distant sound of explosions. Zarian ships beginning their assault. The city was under siege, and they had mere minutes before the planet would be completely overwhelmed. Max, his voice firm and clear. It's now or never. Let's fire it. He punched in the final command, and the weapon roared to life, a surge of brilliant, green energy pulsing from the ground. The beam shot into the sky like a comet, an unstoppable force of nature, racing toward the incoming Xarian ships. The energy from Chlorophilia's bioluminescent flora was harnessed in a magnificent arc, the power overwhelming as it ripped through the darkness. The first Xarian ship in the lead fleet disintegrated in a flash of light, its jagged form torn apart by the immense force of the beam. The others followed in quick succession, the energy cutting through the ships like a blade through paper, their fiery remains scattered across the sky. Max held his breath as the weapon continued its barge, each blast erasing the Xarian's presence from the sky. One by one, the ships exploded, their cries of destruction mingling with the triumphant roar of the weapon. The remaining Xarian ships faltered, disoriented, and decimated, and soon, they began to retreat, their retreating shadows fading into the distance. The control room erupted into applause, but Max barely registered it. His heart was still racing, the adrenaline surging through his veins. The planet had been saved. But there was something else. He felt something different in the air. Lilith was standing at the door, watching him, her gaze no longer cold or distant. There was something softer in her eyes now, something warmer. She stepped forward slowly, and Max met her gaze. She didn't say anything at first, just watched him with an unreadable expression. Finally, she spoke, her voice quiet, filled with something new. "You did it. You saved us. We couldn't have done it without you." Max smiled, his confidence unshaken, but the words struck him more deeply than he expected. He had done it. He had proven himself. But more importantly, it seemed he had earned Lilith's respect. Max, with a wink. "Just doing my part, Lilith. Just doing my part." As the cheers echoed around them, Max realized that he had not only helped save the planet but had also begun to change the way the people of Chlorophilia saw him. And maybe, just maybe, things between him and Lilith were starting to shift too. The grand chamber was alive with murmurs and whispers, the voices of the Chlorophilia Council members rising and falling like a storm-gathering force. Max stood at the center, his heart pounding, but his posture strong. The air was thick with the weight of judgment as the council deliberated, their gazes heavy and scrutinizing. The ancient stone walls of the council hall glowed faintly under the soft bioluminescent lighting, their intricate carvings depicting a history of both peace and war. The room itself seemed to pulse with a sense of timelessness, as if every decision made within its walls carried the weight of the ages. Max felt out of place in the midst of it all, an outsider in a room full of beings who saw him as nothing more than a curiosity. But he wasn't going to let that stop him. He had already proven his worth by helping save the planet from the Xarian attack, but he knew that wasn't enough. He needed to convince them that his presence here wasn't just about survival, but about something much bigger. Something worth fighting for. Lilith stood off to the side, her golden eyes narrowed as she watched Max. Her usual stoic expression had softened in the wake of the battle, but she remained distant, her role as the head of security keeping her emotions carefully concealed. She had seen Max in action, and though she had never been one to show her feelings easily, there was something in the way she looked at him now, a flicker of something deeper. The High Counselor, Verdana, sat at the head of the council table, her deep forest green skin glowing with a regal aura. Her eyes, as golden as Lilith's, scanned Max with a mixture of curiosity and wariness. The other council members sat in silence, waiting for him to speak. Max cleared his throat, stepping forward with confidence, his voice carrying across the room. The time for hesitation was over. Max, with sincere conviction. This is not just a visit for me. I'm not here to simply observe your world or leave once I've satisfied my curiosity. I want to build something lasting between our species. I want to be the bridge that connects Chlorophilia and Earth. His words hung in the air, and for a moment, there was only silence. Max could feel the weight of the council's gaze on him, their judgmental stares trying to pierce through his very soul. They were skeptical, that much was clear. To them, he was still a stranger, a being from a distant, primitive world. But Max wasn't backing down. He couldn't. Max, his voice unwavering. I've seen the beauty of your culture, the richness of your history, and the power of your people. I believe we can learn from each other. We can share knowledge, art, and wisdom. We don't have to remain separated by the vastness of space. We can build something meaningful together. His words were simple, but they carried the weight of everything he had come to believe since he arrived on Chlorophilia. The battles, the moments of connection, the exchanges with Lee and even Lilith, everything had led him to this point. He wasn't just an outsider anymore. He had become part of something larger. And he was willing to fight for it. The council members exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable. Some looked skeptical, others appeared to be deep in thought. Verdana sat quietly, her piercing eyes locked onto Max, as if she were weighing his every word. Finally, she spoke, her voice calm and measured, but with an underlying authority that made Max's stomach tighten. Verdana, with a thoughtful tone. You are asking for much, human. Our people have lived in isolation for centuries. To open ourselves up to others, to share our culture with a species so different from ours, that is no small thing. Max swallowed, the gravity of the moment settling in. I understand. But we humans have been isolated too. Our own world is divided, fighting amongst itself. But if we can find common ground, if we can learn from each other, we might just have a chance at something better. For both our worlds. He glanced over at Lilith, who stood in the shadows, watching him intently. She had been the one who had been most resistant to his presence at first. The cold, no-nonsense security chief who had viewed him as nothing more than a problem to be solved. But after the battle with the Zarians, something had shifted. He could feel it in the way she observed him now. There was a subtle change in her eyes, a recognition of the value he brought to the table. She hadn't said anything, but Max could sense her internal struggle. Lilith, stepping forward, her voice steady but softer than before. Perhaps, it is time to reconsider. The way we have always done things isn't the only way. Max has shown us that. He helped save our planet. He didn't have to. He chose to be here, to fight for us. Max's heart skipped a beat. The recognition in her voice, the slight shift in her demeanor, made his chest swell with something he couldn't quite place. Was it pride? Respect? Maybe even something more. Verdana, looking at Lilith, then back at Max. Your actions have certainly spoken louder than words, human. But, there are others among us who do not share this sentiment. Your presence here challenges everything we've known. Max could feel the pressure mounting. He knew there were those on the council who would never accept him. Some still viewed humans as little more than animals. But he wasn't going to give up. He had come too far. Max, his tone resolute. I'm not asking you to change overnight. But give me a chance. I've seen the potential for something great between our two species. And I know I can help make that happen. For a long moment, the council sat in silence, contemplating his words. Max's heart raced in his chest, but he kept his composure. This was his moment. He had to make them see. He had to show them that there was more to his presence here than just a fleeting curiosity. Finally, Verdana spoke again, her voice steady and commanding. You have one chance, Max Harper. One chance to prove that your words are not just empty promises. The Council will allow you to remain on Chlorophilia, but you must prove your worth beyond the battlefield. Show us that you can be the bridge you claim to be. Show us that you can be a true ally. Max didn't hesitate for a second. I will. I swear it. As the council began to deliberate further, Max stood tall, his eyes scanning the room. For the first time since he arrived on this alien planet, he felt a sense of hope rising inside him. He had been given a chance. It wasn't a guarantee, but it was a start. And with that start, he could do something incredible. Beside him, Lilith watched him with an expression he couldn't quite read, something close to approval, but still guarded. Yet, it was the first step. And Max knew it wouldn't be the last. The grand hall was bathed in the soft, ethereal light of Chlorophilia's bioluminescent plants, casting a warm glow over the gathered crowd. The air hummed with anticipation, a strange mix of reverence and celebration. The council members, adorned in their ceremonial robes, stood in a semicircle at the front of the hall, their golden eyes fixed on the podium where Max stood. He could feel the weight of their gaze, but there was no fear in him now. This was his moment. The people of Chlorophilia had gathered to honor the heroes who had helped defend their world, the ones who had fought against the Zarian invasion. Max wasn't just being honored for his bravery, he was being recognized as someone who had changed the course of their history. The transformation was as real as the soft breeze that swept through the open hall, carrying the scent of distant flowers from the outside world. Lilith stood beside him, her usual military attire replaced by the ceremonial dress of Chlorophilia. The flowing robes shimmered in the light, the intricate patterns of their culture woven into the fabric. She looked breathtakingly beautiful, her green skin glowing softly, her golden eyes focused ahead. But despite the formal setting, there was an undeniable connection between them now, something deeper than mere respect, something that had grown slowly, over time. Max could feel her presence beside him, and it grounded him. She wasn't just a stern security chief anymore. She was someone he had come to care for, someone who had shown him a new world and, in doing so, had changed his life forever. The ceremony began, the voices of the council members echoing through the hall, praising the courage of the warriors who had stood to protect the planet. Max stood there, listening, but his mind kept drifting back to the moment that had brought him here, to the long conversations he had shared with Lilith, the way her fierce strength had softened in his presence, the moments of humor that had bridged the gap between them. And now, As the council finished their speeches and turned to him, Max knew it was his turn to speak. He stepped forward, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. The room fell silent as he addressed the crowd, his voice clear and steady. Max, his tone warm, full of sincerity. At first, I came to Chlorophilia searching for a bride. But what I've found is so much more than I ever expected. He glanced over at Lilith, her eyes locked on him, and for a brief moment, the crowd disappeared. It was just the two of them standing there, two beings from different worlds, brought together by fate, now connected in ways neither could have predicted. Max, his voice full of emotion. I've found a family. I've found a home, a place where I belong. And I've found a love far greater than I could ever imagine. Lilith's eyes softened, the corners of her lips twitching upward in a rare smile. The golden hue of her eyes gleamed with something deeper than mere affection. It was understanding. It was connection. It was love, something they had both found in each other despite the odds, despite the differences between their species. Max smiled, his hand reaching out to gently clasp hers. The touch was simple, but it meant everything. They stood there, together, not as a human and an alien, but as two souls who had found something extraordinary in each other. The crowd erupted into applause, their cheers echoing throughout the hall, but Max and Lilith were lost in their own world. Max, with a soft laugh, still holding her hand. I came here to find a bride, but I found a purpose, and someone I can't imagine my life without. Lilith's smile widened, a rare, genuine smile that reached her eyes. For the first time, she didn't hide behind her usual mask of authority. She let herself feel the warmth of the moment, the connection that had blossomed between them. Lilith, in a voice that was almost a whisper, but clear enough for him to hear. I never thought I'd find someone like you, Max. She leaned in slightly, and Max felt the warmth of her body, the closeness that had grown between them over time. She didn't need to say anything more. The words, the emotions, everything had already been spoken through the actions, the shared moments between them. Max squeezed her hand gently, his heart swelling with an emotion he hadn't expected to feel. In this alien world, with its strange customs and mysterious people, he had found something more precious than he had ever thought possible. He had found love. Not just with a woman, but with a world of people of purpose. And as the cheers continued, the music swelled in the background, carrying the sound of triumph and joy. The bond between Max and Lilith, forged through trials and victories, was now something that would change the course of both their lives. Max and Lilith stood there, hand in hand, their future uncertain but filled with promise. In that moment, the universe felt smaller, the distance between their worlds seemed less insurmountable. They had bridged the gap, and nothing, no force in the galaxy could take that away from them. The relationship between humanity and Chlorophilia, once fractured and filled with distrust, was now starting a new chapter. A chapter of hope, understanding, and love. And with that new beginning, Max and Lilith stepped into a future they had built together. As the echoes of applause faded and the celebrations around Max and Lilith continued, one thing was clear: their journey had only just begun. From a hesitant outsider to a vital part of Chlorophilia's future, Max had proven that sometimes the most unexpected alliances lead to the greatest victories. And in the end, It wasn't just about saving a planet, it was about finding love, understanding, and a place to belong in a universe that is far more vast and mysterious than anyone could ever imagine. But with new alliances comes new challenges. The bond between humanity and Chlorophilia has only just begun to take shape, and who knows what forces may try to tear it apart. What mysteries lie beyond the horizon, waiting for Max and Lilith to uncover? And most importantly, what happens next for these two very different individuals who now share a world, a love, and a future? What do you think? Will Max and Lilith's bond withstand the tests ahead, or will the forces of the galaxy pull them apart? And what's next for their worlds as they begin to connect in ways they never thought possible? Leave your thoughts and predictions in the comments below. We love hearing from you. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to stay tuned for the next chapter in this thrilling saga. The cosmos has many more secrets to reveal, and we're just getting started.